Well, I'm pleased to be joined by Bob Williamson, not only the author of Miracle on Lucky Street, but you lived it. I mean, this is the real life. Tell me a little bit about your entire, you got a lot to tell in the life, but what made you decide to put it all into a book and let everybody know what you've experienced?
Well, I really wanted people to have hope. I had went through so much in my life and reached such a hopeless point. I was hopeless myself. In fact, I was suicidal. And I didn't think there was any hope for me, and I found it, and turned my life around against incredible odds. And I wanted for people to know who've given up hope on either themselves or somebody they know, a child or a brother or parent, whatever, that there is hope, and through Jesus Christ, and so should never give up.
You were homeless, a drug addict, and then eventually able to turn yourself around to a very successful businessman. But in the book, you talk a lot about a car accident that took place. Kind of tell me a little bit about the nurse you met and the first time that she introduced you to the Bible, when it just clicked and you said, I really need to do something about this.
Well, I was homeless. I'd been an alcoholic. I started drinking when I was 12, and I was an alcoholic by 15, turned to drugs at 17, and had lived a very desperate life. I became a meth addict, methamphetamine and heroin, and I had a .357 Magnum. I was holding people up, and been kicked out of the military as a sociopath, and which is, they told me I didn't have a conscience, I was incapable of love, and when I asked them what I could do about it, they told me it was incurable. And I had been in prison, and so I hitchhiked up into Atlanta, and to get away from the police. I found out they were looking for me in New Orleans, and when I got up there, I ended up in a very serious car accident, and I was in the hospital for several months. And while I was recovering, I used to love to read, and I got this nurse would bring me books every day. She became a friend of mine over this period of time, and the librarian would always send me a list of all the best-selling books in the world, and so she would go down the library and check them out for me. Her name was Lydia, and I kept noticing that the Bible was the #1 best-selling book in the world, and I was an atheist at the time. I thought if there was a God, he was mean. I didn't want anything to do with him except ask him why he was so mean. But I decided to read it to try to disprove it, and Lydia gave me her personal Bible. So when I started reading it, I started reading the Old Testament, and I found it to be really boring, and I was going to abandon the project. But I had noticed that Lydia had underlined all kinds of verses in the New Testament, so I decided I'd go ahead and read the New Testament. And when I did, I found that Jesus Christ was nothing like I thought he was. He was very compassionate. He wasn't condescending. All my life, my parents, my teachers, the police, the military, everybody had told me that I would never amount to anything, and I believed it. I thought I was worthless and that I would die young, and probably should have. But the Bible gave me hope for the first time in my life. I had been suicidal, and I was planning my suicide actually when I went to Atlanta, and it said that in the Bible in Philippians 4:13 that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Well, I slammed it shut and threw it on the bed, and I rang the buzzer, and Lydia came in there, and I said, "This Bible is nothing but a lie." I said, "Just get it out of here. I don't want to read it." And she, big heavy-set lady, African-American, she put her hands on her hips and looked at me, and she said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, it says right here I can change my life." And I said, "I'm a meth addict." And I'm putting needles in my arms and in my legs, and I've been that way for years, and there's nothing that can change other than lowering me in the ground in a pine box. And she said, Jesus is God. He can do anything he wants. He walked on water, he made the blind see, he cured the leper, he raised Lazarus from the dead, and if he can do all that, he can change your sorry tale. So she just left, and I laid there and thought about it, and I thought, you know, she's right. I mean, if God could create the world and everything, including me, you know, I could change. And it was the first time I ever really realized that maybe I could change my life. So at that point, it was really the tipping point in my life. I mean, I was 24 years old, and I had evil dripping from every pore, cared nothing about anybody. I was full of hate and bitter. I could have shot somebody between the eyes and never thought twice about it. But my heart changed at that point. I accepted Christ as my Savior, and that began the journey of just completely turning my life around.
When you leave the hospital, a lot of people who are meth addicts or who are drug addicts and drink alcohol, you leave, you always say, I'm going to be cured, and then, you know, a month later, 2 months later, you go back into the habits. But how were you able to use the Bible, to use what you learned in the hospital, to make sure you didn't go back down that path, to make sure that you continued down the right path in life?
Well, the Bible says that we're in spiritual warfare, and you're right, most people have a relapse. I didn't go to rehab at all. I think God just took away my desire for it. It wasn't easy. I mean, not my desire, I suppose, but he gave me the willpower to resist. It was calling to me, but I just stopped, and I didn't go to rehab. The same thing with alcoholism. I was a severe alcoholic, and when I stopped, I just stopped drinking. But in the spiritual warfare, the Bible teaches us that we need to put on the full armor of God. And what that is daily prayer, studying the Bible, having faith, and fellowship with other Christians, and then trying to lead a righteous life, which I didn't know really what that was. And somebody told me one time, well, you know right from wrong. Well, it's doing the right thing. That's righteous living. So I think that you really need all components. And I wasn't perfect, and I'm still not. I just, by reading the Bible, it inspired me to quit. And I didn't ever have any relapses, but I came close on a lot of occasions. And but whenever it would happen, I would just go to the Bible and pray about it, and go to church and meet with other Christians, and that's really the formula. It's not easy to do, obviously, but it can be done. And I've discovered in life that you can do all things through Christ. But that's an interesting verse, because it doesn't say, now that I'm a Christian, Christ will do everything for me. It says, I can do all things. So we have to do our part, and you can't just sit around and not work hard at it. And then the other thing, all things, what does that mean? I mean, if I wanted to have a drug cartel, obviously God's not going to bless that. So it's all things within Christ's will for your life, you know. So I had to understand that, and so it was a daily battle, and it still is. Sometimes I'm out eating with friends, and everybody's having wine but me, and I'd love to have a glass, but I know I won't stop with a glass. I want a bottle or two, and so I just have a glass of water and grit my teeth. But that's kind of how it went for me.
You've referred to that verse a couple of times, but it's probably like saying, well, who's your favorite kid? But is there a favorite passage or a favorite couple passages that you read every morning, or that you like to live by, or when you talk to people, you say, if you take anything from my speeches, take this passage or that passage?
Well, that one became my life's verse. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I just repeat that to myself over and over again whenever I'm faced with adversity or some big challenge. And I really believe it. I mean, my life is a true example of that. I mean, if I should be dead in prison on death row or in an insane asylum, and I'm not, strictly because God transformed my life. I mean, if God wasn't in my life, that's what would have happened to me. So, and by all accounts, I should have. That's why I named the book Miracle on Lucky Street, because it was truly a miracle. It's a miracle I'm alive. I mean, anybody who's read the book, I've had so many near misses, much more than a cat with 9 lives. I mean, I faced death so many times, it's incredible. But so that's my primary verse. But I love the Bible. You know, I didn't ever go to Wharton Business School or Yale or anything, and I didn't have formal education, but I went on to be very successful in business. And people ask me all the time, what's my secret to success? And I didn't have a mentor, I didn't hit the lottery, I didn't inherit any money. I mean, it's strictly, I start every day by reading the Bible, studying it. If I have questions, I research it and try to find my answer there. So it's really my Bible study and common sense that has enabled me to have success in my personal life and my business career, and, you know, of course, redemption. So.
All right, let's talk about a little bit about the businesses. You've owned quite a few of them, 11, I believe, and now Honey Lake Plantation in North Florida. At what point from the hospital bed to getting involved in the Bible did you say, well, I'm going to start a business? How did that transformation happen, and how have you been able, again, everybody always wants to know the secret. I want to know the secret to your success. It would help all of us. But how were you able to go from that lowest point possible to business number 1 all the way to 11 businesses and now with this huge resort?
Well, my first job was the worst job in a huge paint plant. It was 17 acres. It was a big manufacturing plant. And I had the worst job in it. I was stuck down in a dungeon, a little small room. It was very dark and dirty down there. And my job was to keep up with the paint labels. They put a label on every can of paint that they filled. And but I decided that, you know, I didn't really deserve to start at the top with my background. And so I went into it with a really good attitude. I said, you know, I was the first one there, the last one to leave. I cleaned that place up. I organized it. I took pride in it. I painted the floor, the walls, the ceiling white. I got it all lit up. And then, importantly, I figured out a way to save them a lot of money. Back then, I think I saved them like $50,000 a year, which probably be $500,000 or maybe $5 million now in today's money. And they promoted me, and then I went into the next department and did the same thing. And they promoted me 8 times over the next 2 years, all the way up into plant management. And with somebody without a college degree, I was the first person that ever made it that high in that company. And then I don't know, I think the reason I wanted to go into business for myself is I was really disappointed in the politics and organizations. People would get ahead because they'd brown nose or whatever. So I decided to start my own business. All my friends told me I was crazy, and my wife got mad at me because I quit my job and borrowed $1,000 on my credit card. But I just told myself I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I think this is the right way for me to go. I prayed about it. And 6 months later, I had built it into a multi-million-dollar business. I started it in my basement and of my home, and just worked hard and didn't quit when I got discouraged, and worked smart and built it. We had 286,000 customers and 7 distributors around the world. I had invented a paint of my own. I was an artist as a hobby, and there wasn't a good paint available for what I liked, which was airbrush painting. So I just developed one, and then I went from there and developed a publishing company, manufacturing, many other companies. I had 11. And the last one was a software company. I'm self-taught. I just understood computers way back when they first started. It seemed simple to me. I mean, it was like a big filing cabinet, really. And you just take something out of a drawer and you do something with it and put it back. And that's kind of how I thought of it. I've never had a class in computer technology, but I did very well with it. I sold that company for $75 million. I didn't have any debt. And then today I bought a hunting plantation in northern Florida just for my family's use, but I didn't want to retire, and so I built a big resort and a spa on it, and it's $35 million investment, and it's beginning to blossom right now, and we're really enjoying it. But I've always looked at business not as having to go to work and dreading it. I really enjoy it. I'm passionate about it. I'm an insomniac total. I don't sleep but about 3 hours a night. So even though I don't have to work anymore for financial reasons, I just love it. And so I'm still the first one there, the last to leave. I'm incredible energy. And I don't think that life is a dress rehearsal. I mean, this is all we're going to get. And so I give it all I've got, and I'm very positive and very passionate about what I do. But probably, I think one of the traits that I have that a lot of people are missing is perseverance. I have seen some horrible things in my life. I've seen people die right before my eyes, lots of them. And I've seen the worst that the world has to offer. And so when I get into business and I have a business problem, I put it in context of the suffering and so forth that goes on all over the world, particularly in the streets that I grew up on, the main streets, where life is cheap. And that's not a cliche, it's true. Nobody thinks a thing of it. So, and the torture and the misery, and then I think how fortunate we are compared with the rest of the world and a lot of the people. So that's how I maintain, you know, and I think that in part counts for a lot of my success.
You've taught prisoners, you teach your own kids, you have a beautiful family, kids, grandchildren. When you teach kids or you teach people that may not want to learn or may not want to hear, you teach them about the Bible and your life. I'm sure there's some resistance from your own kids, because I know when kids are saying, "Oh, Dad, don't tell me this," or I know better. But at what point do you notice that your kids buy into what you've been through? Because they weren't going through it. They're just saying, "Well, you're just Dad. You know, this can't be real." And then you go and you talk to prisoners about your life, and they've lived some of it, but not everything you have. What's the feeling you get when it just clicks? When you see it in their eyes that what you've been through or what you're teaching them is actually starting to resonate?
Well, it's a wonderful feeling. I was just in a prison ministry in Orlando, Florida, and we went to several prisons, but there were 2,440 men, violent, bitter, angry, tortured men that gave their life to Christ, and it's a beginning of change for them. So it's a wonderful experience. I didn't tell anybody about my past. When I met my wife, as far as she knew, none of my history, she didn't find out about it until we'd been married for quite some time. And when I came public, it was because of my kids. I didn't want my kids to make the same mistakes I made. So I told them about the dangers. Now, my testimony is very powerful because I've been there and I've seen what drinking and alcoholism. I've never met anybody that had a goal to become an alcoholic or a drug addict. So it does happen, and nobody does it on purpose. It just sneaks up on you, and all of a sudden you're trapped. So I warned them about it, and I don't look at the Bible as a list of regulations. I look at it like a loving God, the manufacturer of all humanity. He created us. So it's just like a manufacturer of a car creates an owner's manual, and he says, look, if you change the oil, if you rotate the tires, you do this, you're going to get the best out of this vehicle. Well, the Bible, I think, was written by God for the same purpose. Aside from salvation for eternity, you know, once that's set, that's forever. And you want to be able to get into heaven, of course, but you know, you've got X number of years before you have that. So the Bible was written, if you will do as close as what the Bible recommends, if you'll live as closely as you can to what's said in there, you're going to get the most out of your life. So what is the Bible telling us? Don't lie, don't commit adultery, don't murder, don't steal. All these things. Does anybody think that that's going to do any good, you know? So it's more common sense. I've always looked at the Bible as a help for myself. It's my owner's manual. I have a problem, I go in, I can do preventative things to keep from having a disaster. And I look at sin just like if I would throw a rock at a window, I might regret that rock throwing incident. The instant it leaves my hand, but it goes on and it shatters that glass. So whether I regret it or I don't. So when you sin, it's the same thing. I mean, you might commit adultery and wake up the next morning and really regret it, but it's too late. You know, you can get HIV, or you can get somebody pregnant, or you can get shot by a jealous husband. I mean, the sin, there's going to be a consequence for it. And I think the Bible is that God is saying, listen, you don't want to do this or you're going to have a serious consequence. He's looking out for us. It's not like somebody sitting up there with a fly swatter saying, I'm going to swat you, you know. And I think a lot of people miss the point on that. I think what I understand about God is his compassion and his love and his grace for us, you know. And he's doing what he's doing for our interests, not his own. I mean, you know, he's trying to help us get through this life. And life can be hard, you know, and it is hard. But you have your ups and downs. And to me, success is not financial. I've had financial. I slept on the side of the road, eaten in missions, slept up under bridges, hopped freights. And I've ridden in private jets and limos and stayed in the finest hotels and restaurants in the world and tried a little bit of everything. And what I found is success is not defined by the attainment of wealth, fame, or power, because I know plenty of wealthy, famous, powerful people that are miserable. Miserable shouldn't be anybody's definition of success. So, but success is knowing peace and joy and love. And you can do that whether you live in a double-wide trailer or you live in some big mansion. I mean, it's having that, and it only comes from God. That's the only thing that fill that heart. People say, well, if I could just be happy, if I could only be happy, that would be the end. Well, nobody can be happy all the time, because the Bible says there's a time to grieve. So your best friend or your spouse or your parent or somebody's going to die. How can you be happy at a time like that? But you can know joy through Christ, because you look to, well, when I cross through this death, it's just moving in across the threshold into everlasting beauty and paradise. So I think that that's what everybody should strive for, and get off the kick of trying to be rich or famous or whatever and be content. I mean, not everybody. The Bible teaches that God thought of us eons ago. I mean, he looked at you and he decided to create you, not for your purpose, for his purpose. So, I mean, it says that even the hairs on your head are numbered. And so I think that we all need to understand what is God's purpose for us and try our best to achieve it. And I think that my purpose was to live this horrible life and through his help be transformed and then tell others. And I hope that people understand that no situation is hopeless. I don't care how bad off you are, what you've done. The Bible says look ahead, not behind. When I look in the rearview mirror, I don't like what I see. But when I look ahead, I've got everything ahead of me. So God is not looking at us as we are right now. I mean, I had long hair, greasy, I had tracks all over my arms, I had mean eyes, and I was, you would cross the street to get away from me. God didn't see that. He saw what I could be through His help, you know. Not just now, but 1,000 years from now. So that's how I view it, and I think that that's what we're to do. I mean, we shouldn't look at people and judge them or condemn them and think, well, that guy's hopeless. There's no hope. And a lot of people give up. Just because somebody's in prison, they make mistakes. You show me somebody doesn't make a mistake, we all do, you know. Some of them more serious than others, like me, stupid.